to this interesting session. We organize this from the Bright Lane Smart Service Campus, and it's actually a series of events that we put together around innovativeness in organizations, how to create an innovative and creative organization. We've heard that coming back a couple of times from numerous partners that we have on the campus, and that they say, well, we have all these innovations that we bring from our innovation departments, but we have sometimes a little bit of problem bringing those innovations to actually the day-to-day business. That's why we created a series of events. We do that often together with Petru Kersu of the Open University and Theo van Kessel of APG. Also, a warm welcome to them today. And for this specific event, we chose diversity. And yeah, you see it on the screen already, and its impact on effectiveness and innovation on organizations. So it's a very hot topic. I really look forward to this session, and how we do this usually, and also today, is that we ask one of the two gentlemen to present their ideas on the specific topic, and today that will be diversity. One of them is coming from an academic perspective, and that's Petru. The other one is coming from the business perspective, and that's Theo. And today we open with the academic perspective with Petru, and after that Theo will share his reflections from a business point of view. I have to say a few practical things. We will do another event on this, and then we turn it around. Then Theo will present his views from a business point of view on diversity, and then Petru will reflect. That session is already planned for the 3rd of February in the coming year. And after that, we will do another topic again, and that will be on collaboration. So how to entice and facilitate collaboration in your organization. That will be on the 3rd of March. One more thing, this event is being recorded, so I have to tell you that for privacy matters. So please be aware that this recording this session is recorded. It also will be shared with you after this session, probably in the beginning of next week. So you can also share it again with colleagues or other interested people. For my end, I think I forgot to mention my name. So for the people who don't know me, I see a few of them. I'm Peter Custos, working for the campus organization itself. I'm organizing this event together with Ida Weber, a colleague of mine. But most of the credits obviously go to the speakers of today, and that will be Theo and Petru, and we'll start with Petru. Petru, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Peter, for the introduction. Indeed, this was a very interesting discussion and dialogue in the first round on cultivating innovation mindset. In that meeting, the idea of diversity came as a very important driver of innovation. So then in the debriefing, we decided, well, let's move on with that topic and try to engage in this dialogue between science and practice and see how far we get. So in this first part, my intention is to give you a few insights on diversity and innovation, on that relationship, the way in which it was explored in academic research. So I will first start by defining what diversity is, at least one of the systemic definitions of diversity. And I will then move into the research that explored the association, the relationship between innovation and diversity. And I will focus on meta-analytic results. And as last time when we discussed about innovation, I will use the same strategy of bringing these integrative studies that actually bring together insights from a variety of empirical research carried out in different contexts, because it's really the most integrative way I could find to kind of summarize what research has to say about it. And then I will end with a tentative model in which I will discuss a little bit about what does it mean to have diversity in your organization, and I'll talk about the difference between expressed and suppressed diversity in groups and organizations, and I will reflect a little bit on the paradigms and practices of managing diversity, and then we'll start the discussion. So that's roughly the plan. It will take probably 20-25 minutes to go through my presentation, and then we will invite Theo to reflect. So let's start with the start. Let's define our terms. What is diversity? And it's of course a common word and a common term that is used in public discourse nowadays. Many news are about diversity, managing diversity, or the challenges of diversity in a variety of forms. So we are used to this term, but for the sake of clarity, let's define it as social differentiation. So those differences that can define a particular social system, that can be a group, that can be an organization, a department. So that degree of differentiation will actually reflect what diversity is, and we can of course talk about differences in ethnicity, in gender, in traditions, in knowledge and expertise, in personality, in interests, in political views. So all these issues reflect social differentiation or the degree of differentiation in a system. So for the sake of clarity, let's start from this definition of what diversity is. Now, if you look at the scientific research on diversity, we have clearly two dominating views on how diversity works in organizations. One view is pessimistic, and it says, well, diversity is typically a challenge. It's a problem. Why? Because it brings misunderstandings. It brings difficulties in communicating, in finding a common ground, and it generates conflict, and conflict is destructive, and it typically reduces the performance and innovativeness of an organization. So that's the pessimistic view. Diversity brings problems. The optimistic view would say, no, diversity actually brings resources. Diversity increases the knowledge and expertise, and people can bring to the table to deal with a particular issue, with a particular task that has a degree of complexity that cannot be tackled by an individual alone, for example. So diversity creates this potential for innovation, for creativity, for diversity of ideas or ways of thinking. So if you look at the research on diversity, very often the empirical studies that really tried to understand how diversity works can be clustered in these two views. Now, if you look at the integrative studies on diversity and performance, probably one of the most influential meta-analyses that started really a reflection on whether diversity actually works, that fundamental question was the meta-analysis done by Weber and Donahue in 2001, and they included 24 studies that were published to that moment on diversity, and they have distinguished between these attributes that can be related to the job, so the attributes that link to education, to functional or industrial background, so things that you would say you need for the job. And also, they made a difference with attributes that were not related necessarily to the job, like age, gender, or ethnicity. And when they distinguished the studies that tested the effect of diversity on performance using the two categories of attributes, what they discovered was a shocking result, namely that diversity doesn't work. So there is a non-significant association between diversity and performance, irrespective of whether we take job-related attributes or attributes that are not related to the job. That's problematic, and that's worrying as a result, and that meta-analytic result really steered diversity research, and studies tried to explore, conditions in which diversity might work, might have positive effects or negative effects for performance. And I would like to present the most recent meta-analysis that was just published this year, in which more than 280 effect sizes were included, so pretty much a very significant number of papers. And this study added an extra dimension, namely it looked at mechanisms why diversity would be expected to work or be beneficial for performance, or contrary, be detrimental for performance. And they distinguished between three mechanisms, and they studied the emergent states like cohesion, satisfaction, or commitment. So pretty much the argument being there that the diversity will impact on cohesion and satisfaction, in principle having negative effects. You can imagine that diversity can bring that tension in the group and decrease cohesion and satisfaction. And these emergent states, as they are called in the literature, they are actually beneficial for performance. So one of the things that this study wanted to show is whether the negative effect of diversity is actually explained by the fact that diversity reduces the effectiveness of processes like coordination and communication, and it reduces the positivity of these emergent states. Then the study also included, of course, conflict as one of the important mechanisms that could explain why diversity has negative effects on performance. And actually, this is what the meta-analysis found. So if you look at the diversity, deep level diversity, non-observable diversity like personality or expertise, well, this type of diversity actually reduces the effectiveness of communication, cooperation. It reduces team cohesion and satisfaction with the team, which in turn then will decrease performance. And of course, diversity is positively associated with conflict that is detrimental for performance. So you see, not such a positive view on diversity. And here we're not talking about 1-2 studies, but really the studies that span 2-3 decades of diversity research. And so this is pretty much the story of diversity and performance link. And of course, the question is, why keep talking about diversity if actually this diversity generates more challenges and raises more problems than it solves? And well, we need to talk about diversity. Why? Because diversity, if you look at the very particular outcome of teams like innovation, then diversity works. So it stimulates team innovation, and here we have a meta-analysis published in 2009, and we discussed about it last time as well, in which the correlation between job-related diversity and innovation is positive and significant, but also the correlation between the non-job-related diversity. So pretty much this meta-analysis that you see includes more than answers from more than 23,000 participants, shows that diversity is beneficial for innovation. Now, this is another more recent meta-analysis, and it's one of the most influential studies that was published on diversity and innovation, because they distinguished between the functional background diversity. So this refers to the different types of expertise that is actually represented in the group, and also the educational diversity, the type of education that people have in these groups. And in both respects, both types of diversity are beneficial for creative performance and innovation. So if you look at the educational diversity, that's the strongest positive effect for innovation, and the functional background as well has a positive effect on innovation. These meta-analyses again included some 92 studies. So we kind of try to get towards the more positive side now with respect to diversity. We see that diversity kind of pays off for creative thinking in organizations. Now, another integrative study that included more than 100 papers in which the cultural diversity was considered, so the diversity in cultural background, shows that the cultural diversity has a positive effect on creativity, but also a positive effect on conflict, on task conflict, and the negative effect on social integration. So this is a study that brings forth some possible mechanisms that could actually explain why diversity is good for innovative performance. But how about the general diversity climate in organizations? Because nowadays you have all this discussion and debate about diversity, and all this preaching about valuing diversity, and all this this discourse surrounding this important topic. What can we say about the presence of this diversity positive climate, the effect of this positive diversity climate in organizations? And here we have some very convincing results of a meta-analysis that was just published in 2021, in which they included more than 100 samples that were collected in 800 organizations and more than 16,000 employees, and they distinguish between different outcomes. So they distinguish, for example, between the performance of the individual or the organizational unit. And here you have the meta-analytic estimates for the correlations between diversity, climate, and performance, and you can see that the diversity climate, this shared set of values, that diversity is positive, and you have to really implement ways of working with diversity in the organization. This serves the performance, so it has a positive effect on both individual and organizational unit performance. It generates satisfaction, it increases commitment, engagement, and it reduces the employee withdrawal. So this is a very convincing set of empirical results showing that organizations that manage to create that positivity surrounding diversity as a resource, those have substantial benefits in terms of performance, but also the adaptation of the individual employees to the work environment. Also, this diversity climate and performance link is stronger when diversity is high. So really, it's important. It creates a context in which actually diversity works. Now, let me go to a very important thing that I think we should bear in mind. It's not enough to have diversity. You know, it's not enough to just say, well, we set up a group, we put as much diversity as possible, and we just hope they will tackle the task effectively. No, the core of diversity is to engage in that debate, open debate, to express the views openly, and one of these forms in which diversity is manifested is what we call minority dissent, or really the expression, the open expression of divergent viewpoints during group discussion. So we have this minority that actually challenges the majority of the group members, and this is really the process through which diversity can become visible, can become apparent. So this minority influence has, and the substantial evidence on this from our own research, but also from the research of others, that actually this minority influence, this dissent, impacts on individual creativity, and it generates a very complex understanding at the group level. The groups that have these deviants that challenge them, they really start to think in a more complex way about the task, about the problems they have to solve. And this is really some clear empirical evidence, sometimes in experimental settings. And these deviants are these people that dare to speak up in groups, are effective, especially if they don't trigger relationship conflict. They just trigger that debate, that constructive conflict in groups. If the group, for example, develops a socially accepting climate, if the group manages to create that common identity, that yes, we are different, but at the same time we are part of the same group, and we identify ourselves with the group. These are preconditions that really make those expressions of divergent views effective. So that's something that we have to bear in mind, that is not enough to just plug in diversity and use it as a human resource intervention. I created a diverse department, I created a diverse group, I created a diverse organization, and now I expect that everything will be nice and functional. No, diversity has to be expressed. So if we really have to integrate all the insights that I talked about, you have at least two ways of dealing with diversity. Diversity that is expressed sometimes as divergent opinions, that creates that constructive conflict about the task. How are we doing this? We have a complex problem to solve here. We have a complex task, a new design, a new service that we want to create. How do we go about it? And then you express divergent views, different views, and engage in that constructive conflict. That is the basis for collaboration. And maybe we will touch upon this link in our next meeting, because actually you cannot really talk about collaboration without task conflict. Task conflict is a prerequisite for effective collaboration. But on the other hand, you can also suppress diversity. So you bring in diversity, but then you tell, well, we're all the same, we're all speaking with the same voice, and then you generate that sense of false consensus, that superficial consensus, that in time will trigger conflict, will steer conflict and frictions. And certainly this relationship conflict is not beneficial for innovation. Now, something that we know from the literature and we have to pay special attention to is the fact that this constructive conflict, the task conflict that you see on the upper side of the picture, very often evolves into relational disagreements. Discussions like, I disagree with the point that you express. I have a different view that I would like to share, and I think your view is not accurate. Well, this is something that has to do with the task, but it can evolve very quickly in personal remarks. I think you're incompetent, for example, and then that shift from your view expressed in relationship to the task to you as a person it can happen in a split second. And what it does, it moves the attention of the group from the constructive conflict that they might engage in to relational frictions, to relational disagreements. And relational conflicts are always bad. So then the fundamental question in working with diversity is, how can we block this conflict transformation? How can we make sure that conflict stays constructive? Because that's really the manifestation of diversity, that constructive conflict. And here I tried to summarize what the literature and empirical evidence have to say about this. First of all, the conflict stays constructive if organizational members trust each other. So if you have that climate of trust and safety, that climate in which you feel safe of speaking up, and you know that the others will not chase you or punish you or marginalize you because you just expressed a viewpoint that is different from theirs. So that climate of safety, of trust, that's fundamental for making diversity work and keeping the open expression of diversity into the constructive realm. And then, of course, you have the role of a diversity welcoming climate, that inclusion climate in which people with diverse expertise, with diverse backgrounds, feel welcome to speak up. Sometimes the climate is however not enough, and sometimes you need clear rules, clear norms for collaboration. And even, for example, there are situations in which you make up a diverse group, but they don't dare speak up, or they don't have that practice of really engaging in constructive conflict, and then you can have these ground rules of how do we work together to be able to disagree with each other and at the same time respect each other and make best use of this diversity of ideas that we have in the group. Of course, then we have to talk about the capacity of the group to help members deal with the negative emotions, because every time our views are challenged, we feel these negative emotions. It's not easy to be challenged by others, to have your views criticized. So it always steers these negative emotions. And if the group creates that environment in which these negative emotions are dealt with, are sorted out, and then we keep the focus on the problem that we need to solve and not on the personal remarks, then this constructive conflict remains beneficial for innovation and creativity. So these are a set of results and empirical results that we have in the literature showing which are the conditions that we need to make diversity really work. Now, if you look at the organizational level, we have different ways of looking at diversity, and here I quote 3 paradigms that are described in an influential paper by Thomas and Eli in 96 in Harvard Business Review, in which they say, well, organizations can go about working with diversity in several ways. First of all, they can just avoid discrimination, and discrimination, of course, it's a fundamental social problem, organizational problem that has to be sorted out, avoided, solved. And then you have these organizations that are just focusing on preventing discrimination. Another set of organizations, they use diversity because they realize that diversity is good. It allows them to tap into a more diverse set of clients and or market segments. So if you have diversity in a house, those people with different backgrounds will allow you to reach out to different customers and that's beneficial for you. So that's what we call access and legitimacy. But then the modern way of dealing with diversity, and Thomas Eli called this the emerging paradigm, is the paradigm that actually values diversity, and the paradigm that really uses diversity in the best possible way. So if you look at the well, timeline of how diversity management changed, you could say that in the 60s, 70s, we really had this equal opportunity, employment opportunity IDs, and of course protests, and then the era of the affirmative action that really tried to make this equal employment opportunity alive and well. Towards the 90s, in which this debate and discourse surrounding diversity as a resource for innovation started, and then of course nowadays in a globalized society we have this idea of fully capitalizing on diversity. So we, in a sense, if you have to put this in perspective, you could say we evolved from treating diversity as a problem, as a challenge that we have to fix, that we have to do something with, and now we are in an era in which organizations look at diversity as an asset. But you know, treating diversity as a resource raises that question: how can we make the best use of these resources? It's not enough to have a resource in your organization. It's not enough to have an asset in your group. It's very important how you make use of that resource. How you create that context in which the resource can be transformed in innovative performance in the best possible way. So shortly, that's the presentation of what we know so far about diversity. We've seen that with respect to performance, the results are mixed, and certainly there are mechanisms through which diversity impacts performance. We have seen this distinction between constructive and destructive conflict in relationship to diversity, and we have seen some of the contingencies that could keep conflict in a constructive domain and prevent it from degenerating into dysfunctional relational tensions and frictions. And I would like to end up with this modern view on diversity as an asset, as a resource, organizational resource that is important for innovation, and raise this question on how can we actually make diversity work.
Yeah, Petru, thank you very much for all those insights. I already had the idea that it would not be a straightforward answer, and indeed it's very complex. There are the benefits, and it's really hard to, I would say, wisely manage all those diversities. So I would like to thank you, but also give over the floor to Theo to share his perspectives on diversity and how to include that in the day-to-day organization that he manages.
Okay, thank you, Petru, and thank you, Peter. I have a problem with my camera, so I will do it only by voice. But the thank you sheet is nice in front of everyone. First of all, I totally agree that the acceptance of thinking differently provides a basis for surviving as an organization, especially in a society that is constantly changing and working with complex problems. If you have a simple problem, then it is not necessary to have a very diverse team, because you can go straight forward, and I think you are very performing very well. And if you have a team with all people with the same minds, then you normally see that they improve during time, but at one time the performance will go worse. And it will go worse because they don't have new ideas, new ways of thinking, and the problems are getting more complex. With a diverse team, mostly you see that the performance in the beginning isn't that good. You have to create the circumstances in which that team can go well. And then can happen two things. It will become a team, and that team will perform more better than a homogeneous team, or it will destroy itself because they are all in conflicts and polarizing opinions and so on. So I think the story Pedro told is really possible both in an organization. Diversity can be cherished, or diversity can be a bad thing to do. But if you manage it well, organizations with great diversity are often more innovative, more creative, and solve problems better. Diversity is therefore something to cherish, but building a well-performing diverse team is not something to be taken as granted. So that's my conclusion, is my first conclusion. And why isn't it taken to be granted? And then I start with my personal being. It is not always a comfortable feeling if you notice that despite an open mind, I still have unconscious prejudices somewhere deep inside me about people of a different gender, ethnic background, or sexual orientation. I'm very open-minded. I traveled all over the world. I really love diversity and diverse people. But sometimes you feel those deep hidden feelings are not that open, and that's hard. So you have inside your body and inside your mind, you have an opinion to look for people with the same background or something, because you have a quicker fit with them than with other persons. The professional part is that there are some seeming contradictions to overcome, whereby we also have that natural tendency to try for homogeneity. So what it was in my person, I also see that in our organization or our organizations. It is not an easy task to build an organization that focuses on including individuals from different backgrounds and at the same time guaranteeing the unity of that organization in this diversity. To have everyone singing from the same hymn sheet while still using the power of diversity. To investigate a problem from multiple angles and also make a supported decision. And I think there is not a balance between the part of recognition, the joy of recognition, and the joy of surprise. And maybe you know this quote from the DSM former CEO, who said, you're in the comfort zone when you are looking for the joy of recognition, and you're out of your comfort zone when you are looking for the joy of surprise. But both are very important. So I think I have biases in myself and biases in the organization that make it very difficult to build up diverse teams. And therefore, you sometimes see that there are setting goals on diversity. And setting goals on diversity is, for me, not the right way to do. You cannot say we want to have 50% of women or 30% of foreigners or something like that, because diversity isn't the goal in itself. You have, as a manager, to create the circumstances to make diversity a success. And I think Pedro told some of the things you have to manage, and I will mention them in a few minutes. Now I have to look to my quotes. And that's one of the reasons is that diversity and inclusion are so often lumped together that they are assumed to be the same thing. But that's just not the case. Without inclusion, the crucial connections that attract diverse talent, encourage their participation, foster innovation, and lead to business growth, that won't happen. Diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. And diversity without inclusion is a story of missed opportunities, of employees so used to being overlooked that they no longer share ideas or insights. But diversity with inclusion provides a potent mix of talent retention and engagement. And what makes that you feel included? And I say feel included, and then I have some words: seen, heard, understood, valued, respected, involved. And that are not the hard criteria of 50% men and 50% women and so on. So it is the empathic way of building teams that is very important. And for that, when you build a high performance team, then one of the things is to construct fair processes. Fair processes for decision making, fair process for how we give feedback, a fair process how we accept the differences, but also what if we agree that this is our direction, then you don't complain anymore because we already made that decision and we go further for one voice. The second thing is building trust, and building trust it's very hard, and I think the only thing that you can build trust is share experiences and shared experiences. You have to work together, give feedback, reflect, and look how it's going on. Go to a situation for a weekend in the Ardennes where you drink a lot of beer and talk about your background and so on. So it is not only on the office, but also outside the office, that you construct that team. And there should be a lot of clarity on the walls, because if there's no clarity on the walls in diversity, everyone, I want to do this or I want to do that, and that clarity is very important to make it a performing part. And last but not least, I think investigate a lot of time in what is the real problem, because when you have in the team solution thinkers, they want to jump to the conclusion, and if you jump to the conclusion, you solve the wrong problem, I think. And the last thing, looking for real synergy instead of stucking into the middle. What we see in the Netherlands is that we have a polder model, and that we will not go for the best, but we will go that is acceptable for anyone. And if it is acceptable for anyone, it will not be the best solution. All the persons will not be happy because it is not the best solution. So I think that there you also have to look. And the hybrid situation at the moment, we are working on digital screens and not always together, for me is a more hard way to be more inclusive, because you don't have the personal emotions you see. You can don't have the influence that you have when you see each other in persons. It is not impossible, but it is more hard. And the reward to work on that inclusive, to manage the circumstances to be inclusive, I think that will be that we create a workplace where you can be yourself without any problems, including insecurities, including tattoos, eccentric habits, unique talents, with or without a headscarf. A workplace where you can simply put topics such as hormones, ego, or insecurity on the agenda. And I think that's very important, because if you do that, then you are working in a trustful environment. If you cannot do that, then the environment is not very trustable. Yes, is APG on the right track? I think there's still much more room for improvement. We already did a lot of things, but you cannot say it is for 10 now. If I have to score, I'd say maybe this 5 or 6. We can improve that much more. And I don't have the answer to the question, but we need to bring it further. I don't have a monopoly on wisdom. So I would ask you, imagine 2 situations. You have participated in a diverse team. One that was a success and the other one that was a failure. And can you describe what were the differences between those 2 situations? And maybe that will be the question for the discussion. And because you cannot see me, I will ask Pedro to lead that the discussion if possible. Are there any
thanks, Theo. I'll do so.
First of all, are there any questions about what I told about the way I need to, from a business point of view, to diversity and inclusion? Okay, then
I'm checking the hands. There are no hands. Is someone opening up his mic? Sorry for interrupting. If there are no questions, then maybe it would be a good thing for Pedro to reflect on the reflections of Theo.
Yeah, I mean, Theo has raised a few important issues, especially if I look at the personal experiences. We have to understand that interacting with different others is not comfortable in general. We tend to be attracted, as Theo mentioned, by similar others rather than interacting with diverse and different others. So that's just a part of our human experience. Moreover, when in working in groups, you engage in disagreements and your views are challenged, you are challenged and you are criticized, and it's your views, of course. It's something that the group does as a collective, engage in a debate. But when your views are challenged and criticized, you are criticized as a person, and that's difficult to cope with. And the third element, when the group stands against you, that feeling of being marginalized is fundamentally threatening. So, you see, if you are working with diverse others, if your views are challenged, if the majority of the group is against you, all this creates personal discomfort, and that's not easy to cope with, and it's sometimes easier to get out of it and just avoid those things. So that's why in group conditions, most of us don't express what they think, even if that's valuable for the group, because in relationship to poldering, maybe the views that are supported or brought in by minority are actually the solution to the problem that we're facing. And for example, if we just decide to use a majority vote in a group situation, that's of course a way of coping with the conflict, sorting out the disagreement, but that will shut down a minority that might have the right answer to the problem that you're facing. So you see, all these challenges, I think, have to be properly addressed. And I have an anecdote to tell you. I talked about the research that we have done with minority descent, and we've done an experiment, and we have asked an actor, a trained actor, to join the group and really speak against the majority of the group. And so we're not talking about any person. It's a trained actor. And after the first day of running the experiment, the actor came to us and said, well, you know, it's such an intense emotional experience of being against the majority that I would need support. So what we had to do is to standardize the procedures, and we asked some more actors to help us. So even for a trained actor that was there speaking up against the majority of the group creates that and that the actor knew is a fake situation, but still the emotional reaction is there. And imagine when things happen in real time in real organizations, and your views are criticized by the majority, you realize that you are alone against the tide. Is not an easy feeling to cope with, but still that's one of the roots of generating innovation. Mark, you have a question.
Yeah, I was sorry. I was wondering, listening to you, I think both of you stressed the importance of creating that climate, right? That the feeling of inclusivity or inclusiveness, people feeling valued, heard, and at the same time, Pedro, I think you said at a certain point, this can also, you can spend a lot of time and energy in building that, but it can also be changed in a split second by someone saying something in a certain way or doing something that is not in line with what you're trying to achieve. And at the same time, I also feel, also looking at, let's say, discussions in society, I get the impression that people are also becoming more sensitive to, for example, language being used, or let's say certain, they want to be addressed in the right way. They want to, people are, as I said, it seems like they're getting more sensitive about, okay, am I being valued as an individual, right? Is my identity cultural, or gender, or whatever other identity, is it respected? So how do you prevent, let's say, someone saying something rude, someone saying something inappropriate, which will happen. I mean, it happens to me. I sometimes say things that in retrospect, probably I should have said differently. How do you prevent, those little occurrences, little instances of people, behaving, perhaps not entirely appropriately, from destroying the whole group process? Because I think that's challenging. It's almost like, building trust takes maybe years, but getting rid of it can only take 5 seconds. So I'm curious to hear your views about that. So how to building it is one thing, but how to maintain it if you know that individuals are going to be saying rude things or inappropriate things, or doing inappropriate things at a certain time, because they're human, and all humans do that occasionally.
Very good question.
That's a good point, Mark. I think something that also Theo raised is having a process in place. I called those norms or rules of ground rules, let's say, that could create a framework of how we work together as a group. So that can prevent, let's say, dysfunctional behavior to occur. Having clear ground rules for consensus, and we have also empirical results showing that actually these ground rules for consensus, they stimulate the use of diversity, and they are a collaborative force. But I think the most important thing, Mark, is to deal with it when it occurs. So maybe you cannot prevent it. Maybe the process will not be fully functional. Maybe the rules will not be respected by everyone. But then the question is, what do you do with it when it occurs? And then that's a very important question on how to create that space within the group to tackle these things, to work with these divergent views, to create that safety space in which people can explore and can say, well, I was hurt by the way in which you said that to me. And then you work with those differences, create that space in the group in which you work through the differences. Now, the problem with organizations is that they don't always have time for that. They want solutions. They want things to go fast. And there is no time for reflection. There is no time to work through our differences, which takes time and takes energy to engage in these discussions, and forget about the task for a second, and talk about where we are as people, as individuals, as as unique entities in that group. So that's a challenge mark more than I don't have a pre-cooked solution, but I think creating that space in which people feel safe, trustworthy to talk about these differences is fundamental. And let's not forget, very often the interactions in groups start for distrust, not trust. We assume trust, but what we get in reality is distrust, and we have to work our way through distrust to get to somewhere that resembles a set of trustworthy relationship that we can then work with further on.
Maybe in small addition to this, Pedro, I totally agree that there should be some ground rules how you work together, and that you take care for that if something occurs. Maybe a small tip can also change environment, because if you change environment, you can also change emotions. So if I'm very happy with someone on a coffee machine, and then go in a meeting room, then it starts with new emotions, and it also can be different. So maybe use some of those tactics to solve or to lower the emotions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pedro and Theo. We have a few other remarks and questions in the chat, and I see also a hand coming from Sarah. Unfortunately, we are almost looking at 11 o'clock, so we're out of time. I will definitely make sure that I will note the questions and take them along for next time. But for Sarah, maybe you can make your question explicit so we can be very sure that we also take that along for the coming time.
Thank you for giving me some room. I'll be quick. Just very briefly, I have a question for Pedro about the last slide, which we still see. Diversity is a key resource for innovation if challenges associated with it are wisely managed. So it seems to be an invitation to see diversity indeed going beyond this kind of binary, whether it's a negative thing or a positive thing. That's how I interpreted it. I'm not sure whether that's correct. But I seem to see a contradiction, and I'm not sure whether that's true, whether that is correct, between this slide and the previous slide, where you actually historicize the different diversity management practices, and where you see diversity as a challenge, as something from the past, as opposed to something that is evolved now as a key resource for innovation. So my question is actually, do these diversity management practices used or advocated for in the past, for instance, affirmative action, is that something that you also consider as something from the past, or is that part of your solution that you present now, that it can be a resource for innovation if challenges associated with it are wisely managed?
That's a very good point, Sarah, and I very quick reaction to that. The challenges associated with diversity, they didn't fade away. They are still we're still facing discrimination. We're still talking about the lack of inclusion, the lack of acceptance. So, but just historically, we tended to focus more on the negative consequences, discriminatory practices at the beginning, and eventually ended up discovering, oh, wait a minute, diversity has positive sides as well, and then we tend to move in our social discourse towards valuing diversity, but that doesn't mean that the negative the aspects related to diversity are gone, simply vanish. No, so we also have to take into account. I mean, you cannot, talking about the paradigms, you cannot really embark on valuing diversity if you didn't sort out your discrimination practices. So it's really a trip in which our focus shifted from the problems, the obvious problems that were tied to diversity, to more the opportunities that are brought by diversity. But the two phases still coexist. And maybe we can start, next discussion from exactly this tension, the pluses and minuses, and hopefully Peter has a number of other questions
for sure
ready.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah,
Peter.
for the question.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Sarah. Once more, we're really running out of time. So thank you very much, Petru. Thank you very much, Theo. Very insightful. And for all the audience, thank you for joining and the interaction at the end. Very helpful. And see you next time. The 3rd of February and the 3rd of March. Make a bookmark in the email that we send after this event. We will make them known again. And hope to see you soon. Stay safe. Have a great day. Cheers.
See you.